Hello everyone, and today we're going to be installing a brand new set of lowering springs as well as a Panhard bar and a Jounce bumper kit for a 2012 Mustang. So let's get started. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the front and we're going to mark the lower control arm level while the car is still on the ground just to get the idea of what the correct height is for the lower control arm when we level it later. So now we're ready to crack these lug nuts loose. So that's going to require a 21mm socket and a breaker bar. And the whole idea is we just want to loosen these up before we jack up the vehicle. So now we're ready to lift up the vehicle, and this is going to require a service jack and just one jack stand. We're going to do only one wheel at a time. Now this service jack right here is a low profile service jack. So when we put the lowering spring in, it won't actually touch the car later on. And now that we have a gap under the wheel, let's go ahead and take all these lug nuts off, lift the wheel off, and place it to the side. Now let's go ahead and take that same service jack, and let's go ahead and support the lower control arm. This will require you to jack it up just a little bit, and you want to line up that line we made earlier. That way it's level and everything comes apart nice and easy. And now I'm going to go ahead and grab my 13mm socket and socket wrench, and I'm going to loosen up all four of these upper mounting nuts for the strut. Now you're going to see that throughout this video I'm going to use hand tools as well as power tools just to make this job easier. In fact, I highly recommend power tools because it's going to make your job so much quicker and easier. And then we're going to take that last nut, reinstall it just so I can suspend the strut later on. Let's work our way back in the wheel well, and now let's go ahead and remove the speed sensor support. So all this is going to require is a trim removal tool and a little bit of prying, or in my case a lot of prying. There we go. And the whole idea is we want to disconnect it from the strut. Now let's go ahead and grab our 10mm socket and socket wrench, and let's go and remove the brake hose bracket. And this is just on there very easily, it's only a couple inch-pounds. And we'll set that bolt aside. Now this guy right here, this is where power tools is really going to come in handy. So go ahead and grab your 17mm wrench, and see if I can get that on the back. And then I'm going to take an impact wrench with an 18mm socket and go ahead and remove the stabilizer bar nut. And you can see what I mean where it made power tools a lot easier. So now I can just set that nut aside. Now you may have noticed the stabilizer bar was kind of binded in there. So I'm going to raise the lower control arm just a little bit. And then the stabilizer bar should come right out. Yeah, just like that. That's exactly what we're looking for. So now we can go ahead and lower the control arm and go ahead and remove the service jack to get it out of the way. And these are our last two nuts and bolts we need to remove. These are your strut bolts with your strut flag nuts. So all you're going to need is your 18mm socket and your impact wrench. And we'll go ahead and loosen these up. And all we want to do is take the nuts off. And there's one. And I'm going to work our way to the bottom one. And I'm keeping the bolts on there for a good reason. So let's go ahead and get the second one off. Come on. And there we go. And now I'm repositioning the camera. Let's go ahead and remove the bottom bolt first. All right, and we'll set that one aside. Now this right here, see where I'm positioning my hand? I'm supporting the rotor before I take this bolt off, and you'll see why. So I'm going to take this bolt off very carefully. And there we go. And watch my hand. As I release pressure off of it, you're going to see the rotor come down with it. Just like that. So holding on to it kept it from hitting us. And now we're ready to move the strut. So I'm going to go ahead and take off that one nut up the top. It should be finger tight, so it should come off very easy. There we go. And this strut should fall right out. Let's see if I can wiggle it. There we go. And I'm bringing it out very gently so I don't hit anything. Don't want to scratch any of the paint or anything. So now that we have the strut out, let's go and remove that rubber cap. Set that aside. Grab my same white markers I had earlier. Should give it a little shake. I want to mark how many threads are on this. So we're about 4 threads down, so that way I know where to put the nut back. And then also, I'm going to put a little arrow, and this is going to face towards the front of the vehicle. So F is for front. And now we're ready to compress the spring. And we're going to use a spring compression toolkit. Now this we got from a local auto parts store. We just borrowed it. So all you have to do is just ask them for it, and they'll typically let you borrow it with a day or two, and you just give it right back. And it's real easy to use. It's nothing to be nervous about. So we went ahead and went to the opposite ends of the spring, and then started compressing it using our power tools. And the trick to this is start with one side. Once you start compressing one side, work to the other side. You want to try to do this as evenly as possible. Now just keep in mind, and for those of you who may want to know, it's a 19mm socket, but yours may vary depending on which set you're using. So we're just going to go back and forth until it compresses to a great amount to where it takes tension off the top nut. And a little bit more. And you also start seeing a gapper at the top. That's when you know it started relieving tension. And a little bit more just to be safe. There we go. And now let's go ahead and grab a 21mm socket and our impact wrench and go ahead and remove the top nut. So we can go ahead and remove the upper mount assembly. And this comes off fairly easy. Just try to keep it in one piece. And come on. There we go. We'll set that aside. Looks like it's in good condition. And then usually these springs come right off, but this one was kind of on there really good. I guess it's been on there for quite a while. So just give it a little bit of wiggle, a little bit more, and there we go. So now that we have the spring off, let's go and remove our spring compressor. And it's the same way we put it on. We're going to start with one side, loosen it up. Now let's get that side a little bit more. There we go. And we're going to work our way back and forth until it's nice and evenly off. So take that side off and then the other. Keep going back and forth. And once the compressor starts falling off, that's when you know you're done. So there's one, and there's two. And before we install the spring, let's go and clean up the strut a little bit. So we're going to use some soapy water, a wire brush, and a cloth. And we just want to get any dirt or debris that's on this strut. We want to make this install as clean as possible. I'm going to remove that dust boot as well. Just put that to the side. And we're going to try to clean out this whole area right here. You're going to see a lot of debris in there. And let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. Yeah, it looks like a lot of red debris. And it's coming from that bumper right there. It's all red. That all needs to come out. So let's go and grab some soapy water and try and get that as clean as possible. Because the whole idea is there's holes in the middle of the strut. That's pretty much for a drain. And they're pretty much clogged up. And let's zoom in, and you can look at those drain holes. There should be one on both sides. So the fact that we can see through them is a great sign. That means the drain holes can do their job. So now we get to start installing the new parts. And we're going to start with the Jounce bumper. So this one looks pretty rough. This one looks like it started deteriorating. But we have a brand new one right here. And this just slides right on. We're going to put it close to the same spot as where the old one was. And of course, reinstall our dust boot. So now we can go ahead and set in our brand new spring. And that thing looks awesome. Makes it look really nice. And you want to twist it in place so it butts right up against that metal plate right there. It needs to line up and contour perfectly. Just like that. And now we're ready to compress our brand new spring. So we're going to use that same compressor tool as we did earlier. We're going to start on one side. And then work our way back to the other side. Same thing as earlier. Go back and forth until it's down far enough to where you can get that assembly on top on. So let's see. We'll line it up a little bit. And you should be able to see a few threads. And yep, looks like we can see a few. So let's go ahead and install our nut. So we're going to add some thread locking compound to the nut. And then of course you're going to always start a nut by hand threading it. So let's see if we can get a few threads on there. And yep, got a couple threads on there. Now let's go ahead and grab our impact wrench with our 21mm socket. Get a few turns. Alright, so it looks like the nut is turning with the shaft. That's no problem. So that compression tool, go ahead and relieve some of the pressure. The whole idea is we want to put tension on that top assembly. Just so it gives a little bit of tension. And we're going to go ahead and turn that nut again. Oh yeah, there we go. Now we're actually starting to get some leverage on there. And look at that. We're 4 threads down. That's exactly where we want to be. We actually matched up that white marking we added earlier. And now we went ahead and started removing our compression tool. It's the same things we did earlier, back and forth. And it looks like the spring turned a little bit. So it looks like we need to go ahead and compress this just a little bit, just so we can turn the spring and put it back in place. Just like that. And now we got it in the right spot. So now we get to install our strut. So let's go ahead and position in place. And I'm going to try to do this without hitting the camera or the lighting. And you should see the 4 studs come through the holes. Come on. Alright, there we go. Now I'm going ahead and put a nut in there just to hold it in place so I don't lose it. So now let's go ahead and work our way back in the wheel well. And let's go ahead and reposition the wheel spindle in place so we can get this strut lined up with these holes. So I'm going to try to do it while trying not and getting in front of the camera. Let's see. Alright, so we're almost there. There we go. So we position the strut with the holes. And we're going to do the reverse order. We're going to put in the top bolt first. See if I can get in there at least. Come on. Come on. There we go. Now that's where it gets a little bit easier. We'll take that bottom one, same thing. And you might have to give it a little bit of wiggle, but it'll go in. Come on. There we go. So let's go ahead and use our service jack now and go ahead and raise our lower control arm. Same thing. We want to line up that one line we made earlier. And of course, grab your thread locking compound and we're going to apply a little bit to the threads. And let's go ahead and install our flag nuts. And we're just going to get at least a few threads on there so I don't have to hold it. All right, there's one. And let's get the bottom one as well. Now let's grab our impact wrench and tighten this up. Beautiful. Let's go to the bottom one as well. Very nice. And of course, we always torque it down, so it's going to be 166 foot-pounds, so it's going to require a little bit of oomph. All right, there's one, and let's get the bottom one. And it's going to require a few turns. Come on. There we go. Perfect. And now for our easiest install, it's our speed sensor support. And there's still a little bit left of the Christmas tree, so we're going to push that right in. Yeah, and it looks like it's not going anywhere. And now let's go ahead and grab some thread lock compound. Apply a little bit to this bolt so we can go ahead and install our brake hose bracket. And we're going to start, obviously, by hand tightening it. And there we go. Get a little bit, few more threads on there. Grab my 2mm socket and socket wrench till it's nice and snug. And beautiful. And of course, we'll torque it down to 177 inch-pounds. And beautiful. So now we get to give our knees a break. Let's go to these upper nuts. So we're going to apply some threadline compound to the top of this strut. And we'll make sure we get all 4 of these studs. Very nice. And then we'll go ahead and tighten down all 4 of these nuts, and we'll go ahead and do a crisscross pattern. Perfect. And then we'll tighten it down to 26 foot-pounds. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And of course, I always like to mark it when I'm done, just to make sure these nuts don't move later on in life. All right, now back to the wheel well. Looking at stabilizer bar. Yeah, it looks like the strut's a little bit too low. So let's go ahead and take our service jack and go ahead and raise it up just a little bit until it lines up. Beautiful. Made it a little easier on us. So I'm going to add some thread locking compound on that one as well. And then we'll go ahead and put on our nut by hand. We'll see if I can get a few threads on there. Very nice. Take my 17mm wrench. Go ahead and make sure I got it on the back. And of course, take our impact wrench with our 18mm socket and go ahead and tighten it down. And then, of course, we'll torque it down to 85 foot-pounds. So let's see if I can get in there. Come on. One more little extra turn. And there we go. Perfect. And we'll go ahead and mark that one as well. Why not? And now let's go ahead and lower the control arm, and let's move that service jack out of the way so that everything should be in a nice relaxed state. Now let's go ahead and install our wheel and lug nuts. Same thing as earlier. We're going to use our 21mm socket and socket wrench. And we're going to get the as tight as possible, making a star pattern. And then take your service jack, go ahead and remove your jack stand and lower it down. Go slow, make sure your service jack does not touch your vehicle. And of course, we're going to torque down all 5 of these lug nuts in a star pattern with 100 foot-pounds. And with the front complete, let's work our way to the back. Now before I get started, I'm going to inch my way under the vehicle, hopefully not hit my head, and go ahead and mark where the shock absorber height is while the car is underweight. So there's one right there. I'm going to go to the other side and do the same as well. That way I know where to jack this up later on. So now let's go ahead and lift up the rear end of the vehicle. So you're going to need your service jack and install 2 jack stands. Now as I lower the service jack, it's still going to support the rear suspension. And now let's go ahead and remove both wheels. So you're going to need your 20mm socket and impact wrench. So now let's go ahead and grab our 15mm socket, and let's go and remove the stabilizer bar link bolts. So there's one nut, it fell on the ground. And go to the other side and remove the same one as well. And yep, that one fell on the ground as well. So I'm going to take this one bolt out, set it to the side. And I'm going to go back to the other side, remove this one as well. Come on. Very nice. And gently lower the stabilizer bar. And now that the stabilizer bar is out of the way, now we can remove our Panhard rod bolts. And this is going to require an 18mm socket and a very weird angle. So I'm going to try to loosen this up a little bit with this nice breaker bar. All right, there we go. Now we can take this whole thing off. All right, so there's one bolt, and we'll set those aside. And this one I can use with an impact wrench. This one was just easy to get to. And catch the nut. There we go. Beautiful. And yep, that still looks like it's in good order. Now this step may require a little bit of brute force. We're going to use a pry bar and try to get this out. Ah, there we go. So it was on there really good, but it just required a little bit of oomph. So now let's go ahead and compare the old with the new. So you can tell the new one looks a lot better. It looks a lot cleaner. But it is shorter, and that's actually meant to be that way. So we want to adjust the Panhard bar rod just so it's the exact same length as the original. So go ahead and loosen up those locking nuts and go ahead and adjust it till they're the exact same length. And it looks like we got this the right height, so let's go ahead and snug down these locking nuts with a 27mm wrench and a 25mm wrench. The 25's for the middle and the 27's for the locking nuts. And this beautiful setup came with some grease fittings, so let's go ahead and install them. So all we're going to need is an 8mm wrench, and we're just going to tighten these down till they're nice and snug. So there's one, and then we'll go to the other side as well. And you want to make sure they're both facing the same direction. So for these grease fittings, they're going to be facing downward when you install it on the vehicle. And there's two. And of course, let's test it out and make sure it's got plenty of grease. And we'll go ahead and pump this. And you should see grease coming out of the side. Now this is an excess amount of grease. That's when you know you have enough, but we're just showing you this is what it looks like when you have enough grease in there. You're going to see some come out. Now with the rod set up, let's go and install it with the bolts, and we're going to start with the driver's side. Go ahead and fit that in. There we go. And then I'm going to lift up the driver's side and see if I can get that in place. I might have to give it a little bit of whack. Come on. There we go. And if you got the exact same length, it should line up almost perfectly. And this one did. So now let's go and install our bolts. Now this one I'm installing backwards, and I'm doing it on purpose. It just makes it easier to get to on the installation process. And as you can see, I'm tightening it up with ease. It's not fighting me as much. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. So let's get that nice and snug. And then I'll work my way to the driver's side and tighten this one up with the impact wrench just because it's just so much easier. A few more clicks. Perfect. And of course, just like anything, we're going to torque it down. This one's going to be 129 foot-pounds. And, all right, there's one. And now go to the driver's side. And that's two. Now let's go ahead and grab our 15mm socket. And let's go ahead and take off the shock absorber lower bolts. Same thing as earlier. Comes off pretty easy. All right, there's the nut. Get that impact wrench off. Slide a bolt right off. Nice. And do the same thing on the driver's side. Come on. And that should come right off. And then we'll take that bolt off just the same. And come on. Beautiful. So now let's go ahead and lower the rear axle. This makes it easier so we can get those springs off. And of course we'll take our pry bar, get right under the spring, see if we can lift it. There we go. And just go ahead and pull it right out. And if you need to lower the rear suspension more, you can. But this one seems to be the right height. And then we'll take our new spring, install it the same way as the old one came out. And you want to line it up just the same. You should see the indents, everything line up. And we'll go ahead and rotate it once it's in place. And there we go, about right there. Very nice. And we'll repeat the same steps on the passenger side as well. And it looks like the little rubber cushion came off. No big deal. We'll just throw that right back on. And then again, same thing. We'll slide that right into place, and it should fit like a glove. And for our last new part, we have our rear Jounce bumpers. And this is going to require a T40 Torx bit. And these are on pretty good because it has a little bit of rust, but they came right out. And there's the second one. And we're going to peel this right off. Very nice. It was rusted on, so it was on there pretty good. And we'll go ahead and install the new one in the same spot. Now these new ones came with new bolts, which works out. So let's go and apply some thread locking compound. Start by finger tightening them. And then go ahead and tighten it down to about 22 foot-pounds, or until it's nice and snug. And we'll repeat the same steps on the passenger side as well. And it looked like it came out very nice. And let's go ahead and lift up the rear end one more time. We want to go ahead and get it level so we can install those bolts for the shock absorbers. So it's going to require quite a bit of height. So you can see I need a little bit more. Probably a hair more. There we go. Beautiful. And now let's go ahead and take our bolts and reinstall them. And see if I can get it somewhat in there. Come on. There we go. And add a little bit of thread locking compound as usual. Get our nut in place, and we'll go ahead and start it by hand tightening it. And then we'll take our impact wrench and tighten her up. And then we'll go ahead and torque down both bolts to 85 foot-pounds. Starting to notice a common trend when it comes to that number. And beautiful. All right, we're almost done. Now let's go ahead and install our stabilizer bar link bolts. So same thing, we'll go ahead and line that up. See if we can get the bolt in there. Come on. A little bit finesse. There we go. So there's one. And let's get the driver's side as well. All right, so that's in there. Now let's go ahead and add our thread line compound, or at least try to. And then add our nut. Let's go ahead and start by finger tightening it. And of course, we'll go ahead and tighten it up using our impact wrench just till it's nice and snug. And all right, so there's one. We'll go do the second one as well. And there's two. And we'll torque these bolts down as well to 85 foot-pounds. So there's one and two. And now we can install our rear wheels. So you're going to need your 21mm socket. And we're going to use our impact wrench for this one. And we're going to create a start pattern just till it's nice and snug. And for the last time, let's go ahead and lift up the rear end so we can remove those jack stands. Probably a little bit more. We'll go ahead and slide these bad boys out. And then go ahead and lower it down and make sure it doesn't touch your service jack on the way out. And now let's go ahead and verify we torque down these lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. All right, there's one. And there's two. Now this is very important. This is why you need a brand new Panhard rod. You can see where the wheel is sticking out. It's actually sticking out probably close to 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch. Whereas on the other side, the passenger side, the wheel is in by about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. So this is where you need to adjust your Panhard rod. So we're going to loosen up both these locking nuts. At least try to. Let's see if we can get the hand in there. All right, so we're going to loosen these up, and you're going to bring in the rod. You're going to make the rod shorter. And this is going to adjust where your wheels are. So go and grab your 25mm wrench, or in this case our adjustable wrench, and we're going to turn it just until you get the measurements to be lined up. So now I'm going to grab something that's a little more accurate, and that looks like it's close to 6mm, maybe 7mm. And then we go back to the driver's side, the wheel is actually in a little bit more, which is perfect. And this one looks to be about the same, about 6 to 7mm. So it looks like we lined it up right where we want it. So now let's go ahead and tighten down those locking nuts and make sure this Panhard rod does not move. And we did some before and after measurements. This is the front. Now looking at the difference between the two, it's about a 3/4 inch difference. And on the rear, it's about 1 3/8 difference. Now this is before the car settles, so give it about a day or two, and it should be right about 1.5 inch. And you can see the before and after shots, and they turned out looking awesome. Well, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe.